Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're ditching the scuba gear. We're trading it in for combat boots. We're
Yeah.
dropping into Black Hawk Down,
Buckle up.
and not the movie. We're going deep, deep into the book,
Oh, yeah. Straight to the sore.
the source, to uncover the raw human experience of the Battle of Mogadishu.
We're talking about feeling that Mogadishu grit beneath your boots. I mean, this city, it shimmers with this, deceptive beauty.
Oh yeah,
Think like sun-baked streets, buildings, scarred by war. The only things untouched, the stunning white mosques.
Wow.
It's here. Against this backdrop of contrasts, an elite force of Delta Force and Army Rangers, they're preparing for what should be a swift mission.
right. A quick in and out, like we said.
Yeah.
And the book, it introduces us to guys like Sergeant Eversman. You can practically hear those Black Hawk rotors
Oh,
whirring as he's rehearsing the mission in his head. These are the best of the best.
absolutely.
Cutting-edge technology, prep for a precise strike. So where does it all go so wrong?
Well, that's where Black Hawk Down just throws you right into the heart of it. It doesn't just tell the story, it slams the stark reality of war right in your lap,
Yeah.
especially in a place as volatile as Mogadishu.
Okay.
And it does this by highlighting this chasm between the American soldiers' expectations and then the brutal reality. You see, Bowden, the author, he masterfully contrasts this technological, superiority of the U.S. forces with the almost casual way some Somalis engage in warfare.
That's like two worlds colliding.
It is.
On one hand, you've got the U.S. military, this highly trained, technologically advanced force, and on the other, you have Somali fighters. They seem almost indifferent to the danger.
It's almost a nonchalant approach to warfare.
Yeah.
And you know that difference, it's not just fascinating, it's a key insight into why the battle unfolded the way it did. It's a clash of cultures, of tactics, and tragically, it often results in civilians caught in the crossfire. Imagine this. Bowden describes how people in Mogadishu would flock towards gunfire, commotion,
Really?
almost oblivious to the danger.
That's insane.
Yeah,
Talk about adding another layer of complexity to an already intense situation.
exactly.
It makes you wonder, how do you even begin to fight a battle
Yeah.
when you can't tell who's a combatant and who's just a civilian caught in the crosshairs?
That is the point that Bowden drives home throughout the entire book, this inherent complexity of war, particularly in urban environments. This isn't some, distant battlefield. This is a fight for survival playing out on crowded streets. A city teeming with life, where that line between combatant and civilian, it becomes tragically blurred.
And that fight for survival, it explodes the moment those Rangers fast rope from their Blackhawks.
Forget that quick in and out.
Right?
They are met with immediate and ferocious resistance.
Wow.
And then, boom, the unthinkable happens. A Black Hawk Super 6-1 is ripped from the sky.
And that's where Black Hawk Down truly shines.
Yes.
You're no longer an observer. You are thrown headfirst into the heart of the battle. The narrative shifts perspectives. Soldiers on the ground, pilots in the air, even Somalis caught in the crossfire. It's visceral. It's multifaceted, giving you this almost overwhelming sense of chaos. Imagine the weight on Sergeant Eversman's shoulders, pinned down in those narrow streets.
Oh, man.
The fate of his man resting entirely on his next decision.
And Bowden puts you right there.
You can practically taste the dust in the air, smell the gunpowder, feel that knot of panic tightening in your gut as that mission spirals from a swift extraction into a desperate fight for survival. And let's be clear, this book does not shy away from the raw, brutal reality of war.
Not at all. Take Specialist Goodale, for example. Here's a young man, engaged to be married, thrust into a kill-or-be-killed situation. The book doesn't just tell you about the adrenaline, it puts you in Goodale's shoes as he tries to reconcile taking a life
Wow.
with the love he feels for his fiancée back in Iowa.
It's those glimpses into the human cost of war, the internal struggles of these soldiers, that makes Black Hawk Down so impactful.
It does.
These aren't just faceless figures in a history book. These are young men with hopes, dreams, fears, families they desperately want to get back to.
And that's the genius of Bowden's writing. He humanizes these soldiers. He elevates the book beyond a dry military account. He weaves in their attempts at humor,
Yeah.
their camaraderie, the way they cling to those slivers of lightheartedness in the face of unimaginable horror. It's a testament to the strength of the human spirit, that ability to find connection even in the darkest of times.
Speaking of finding light in the darkness, the book talks about the Rangers imitating their captain, Steele, in these impromptu skits.
Oh, yeah.
It's hilarious, but then you remember the circumstances. And it's also incredibly poignant. Or the story about Specialist Colette.
Yes.
And his combat jacket, a deck of
A
cards.
simple deck of cards.
But for him, it represents a small piece of home, a connection to his life outside the war zone. It's these seemingly insignificant details, these small acts of defiance against the ever-present threat of death, that offer a glimpse into their resilience. And talk about resilience. The book doesn't skimp on the acts of courage either. We're talking about guys like Sergeant Nelson, exposed in the street, holding off the enemy with his M60 machine gun, or Staff Sergeant Watson, putting his own life on the line to shield a wounded comrade.
These acts of selflessness, of unwavering loyalty, they speak volumes about the bonds forged in the crucible of combat. These men, they didn't just fight for their country or a mission, they fought for each other. They lived for each other, and they were prepared to die for each other. And through it all, Bowden keeps you on the edge of your seat, mirroring that chaotic nature of the battle in his writing.
You're right. The narrative itself becomes a battleground. Confusion, miscommunication, this relentless enemy turning a routine mission into a desperate fight for survival. It really makes you question the bigger picture, doesn't it?
It does.
Were these soldiers prepared for this specific situation? Was the objective clear? Could anything have been done to prevent this loss of life?
Those are the questions.
It's easy to get caught up in the American soldier's experience. But Black Hawk Down doesn't let you off that easy. It forces you to confront the Somali perspective, their motivations, their anger, their losses. And it's a side of the story we rarely hear.
And it's crucial to remember this battle didn't erupt in a vacuum, you know? These were real people caught in this maelstrom of historical forces that they didn't necessarily control. Take Ali, for instance. Bowden introduces him as this young Somali student, a regular guy with a shop, gets swept up in the conflict after his brother is killed.
It's a brutal reminder that war doesn't care who you are or what you believe. It just leaves its mark on everyone and everything it touches.
Precisely. And Ali's story, it underscores a point Bowden emphasizes throughout the book, that unpredictable and profound ways war impacts everyone involved. It shatters that illusion that there are these neat sides to choose from. We also meet figures like Moalim, a militia leader fueled by this burning resentment of foreign intervention. Through his eyes, we see the battle as a struggle to defend their homeland, a fight for their own vision of justice.
So we're not just talking about a clash of armies here, but a collision of worldviews.
Absolutely.
Of deeply held beliefs.
Deeply held.
It's like Bowden wants us to understand that there are no easy answers. There are no clear-cut heroes and villains in this story.
Exactly. Black Hawk Down forces you to confront the messy realities of war. The idea that every action, every motivation exists in this complex web of perspectives. It's not a simple case of good versus evil. It's about human beings grappling with impossible choices in an impossible situation.
And speaking of impossible choices, the book doesn't just focus on the soldiers on the ground. It also pulls back the curtain on the leaders, both American and Somali, who are trying to navigate this unfolding crisis. We see General Garrison, the man in charge of the operation, portrayed as this no-nonsense leader, a realist who understands the true cost of war.
Garrison is fascinating because he embodies that tension between, like, strategic thinking and the very human weight of responsibility. He's all about meticulous planning, decisive action, but you also really feel the burden he carries, knowing that his decisions have life or death consequences for the soldiers under his command.
Yeah, it's a side of leadership we don't often see, that internal struggle between the detached strategist and the leader who deeply cares about the lives on the line.
Absolutely. And then you have Aidid, the Somali warlord, this almost mythical figure who remains elusive throughout the book. Bowden paints him as this master manipulator, someone who understands the levers of power in Somalia, using propaganda, tribal loyalties to his advantage.
He's like a ghost, this shadowy figure pulling strings from the shadows.
Always one step ahead.
All right, it's easy to demonize a figure like that, but Bowden challenges us to see him as a product of his environment. A man driven by his own ambitions, fueled by the very chaos he helps create.
It is a chilling but necessary reminder that leaders, both the ones we admire and the ones we revile, they are shaped by the world they inhabit. And meanwhile, as these figures grapple with the bigger picture, the soldiers trapped in the city are fighting for their lives. They've survived that initial assault, but now they're surrounded, low on ammo, waiting for rescue, in a city that's become a labyrinth of danger.
And it's in these harrowing hours that the true meaning of brotherhood shines through.
Oh, yeah.
They're sharing their dwindling supplies, tending to their wounded, cracking jokes in the face of death. It's like their humanity becomes their shield. their way of pushing back against that overwhelming fear.
And despair.
Yeah.
It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Now, Bowden doesn't sugarcoat the psychological toll. You see it in Specialist Carlson, nearly paralyzed by fear. Or in Private Moore, vowing to die fighting rather than hiding. But you also see these incredible acts of courage.
And speaking of courage, the book doesn't just focus on the soldiers grabbed in the city. It takes us behind the scenes of the rescue mission.
Yeah.
This incredibly complex and dangerous operation involving American, Malaysian, and Pakistani forces.
A logistical nightmare.
Right. It's a race against time as they try to reach that crash site.
It's easy to overlook the challenges of coordinating a multinational military operation, especially in a hostile urban environment. Where the enemy is almost indistinguishable from civilians, Bowden masterfully builds tension, the planning, the communication breakdowns, the frustration as every delay increases the risk to those trapped soldiers.
Yeah, and yet even in the midst of this chaos, we see these moments of remarkable humanity. There's a passage where a Pakistani soldier offers water to a wounded American.
Right.
It's a small gesture, but it speaks volumes about our shared humanity, even amidst the brutality of war.
Those glimpses of compassion, like flickers of light in the darkness, reminders that even in the darkest of times, that human connection, it can still exist. The rescue itself is this harrowing ordeal, a brutal fight to extract the surviving soldiers as dawn breaks, and that Somali resistance intensifies.
It's a victory, but a costly one.
That's it.
It is?
A hard-won triumph. But it's etched with the faces of the fallen. Bowden doesn't let us forget the price of that victory. As he describes those exhausted soldiers returning to base, their faces just etched with the unseen wounds of what they've witnessed, the grief for their lost brothers.
And that's where Black Hawk Down leaves you at the end of this part, with this profound sense of the battle's lasting impact. It's not just about those chaotic days in Mogadishu. It's about the ripple effect that touches the lives of these soldiers, their families, the Somali people, the American consciousness.
That dust settles in Mogadishu, but Black Hawk Down, it doesn't let you turn away.
No.
It pulls you right into the aftermath.
Oh, yeah.
The emotional wreckage left behind, and it's just as powerful as the battle itself. It's the quiet moments that hit the hardest, you know? Bowden takes us back to the home front, to the families who live through every parent's worst nightmare. Imagine being Stephanie Schuhart, wife of Delta Force Sergeant Randy Schuhart. She gets a call. One of the guys has been killed. And then the agonizing wait for confirmation.
It's that gut-wrenching uncertainty, clinging to that sliver of hope.
Just tears you apart.
Yeah.
And it highlights those invisible wounds of war, the families left behind, grappling with a loss that's always present. Bowden shares Deanna Joyce's story. Her husband, Sergeant Casey Joyce, was killed in action, and the way she finds out. President Clinton offering condolences on TV.
Oh, wow.
Before she even knows for sure about Casey.
Talk about a gut punch. It's like the public acknowledgement of their loss somehow precedes their own private confirmation.
It's a stark illustration of how war just upends everything. It intrudes into living rooms, into everyday life in the most unexpected and heartbreaking ways. And, you know, it wasn't just the families directly affected. Black Hawk Down captures how the battle sent these shockwaves through American society, sparking a debate about the U.S. role in Somalia.
Right.
What were the mission objectives?
Yeah. Was it worth the sacrifices made?
Especially when those initial reports of a successful raid gave way to those images of dead American soldiers being dragged through the streets.
It makes you think about the power of images, the way they can shape public opinion, even when the full story is so much more complex.
Right. And Bowden doesn't shy away from the political fallout. We see President Clinton grappling with the aftermath, demanding answers, bearing the weight of sending those soldiers into harm's way. It's a stark reminder that leadership comes at a price, right?
Right.
The burden of making those life or death decisions.
Yeah.
And living with the consequences.
It humanizes figures like Clinton. You see him not just as the president, but as a man wrestling with the weight of those losses.
And then there's Ambassador Robert Oakley, this seasoned diplomat, thrust back into the chaos to negotiate the release of the captured pilot, Mike Durant.
Yeah.
He represents a different kind of courage, the courage of diplomacy, of navigating these complex political landscapes, of trying to find a peaceful resolution amidst the wreckage.
He seems to embody that calm in the storm, doesn't he? The book talks about his deep understanding of Somali culture, how he walked that tightrope between diplomacy and firmness.
Exactly. Oakley understood that getting Durant back wasn't just about military might. It required understanding the nuances of Somali politics, finding common ground amidst the chaos.
Right.
And then there's Durant himself, 11 days as a prisoner of war, uncertain of his fate, enduring both physical pain and the psychological torment of captivity.
Black Hawk Down doesn't glamorize it, does it? It lays bare the raw reality of being a prisoner. The fear, the isolation, that constant struggle to hold on to hope.
No, it doesn't. And through Durant's experience, Bowden offers a glimpse into the Somali perspective on the conflict. We see their anger towards American intervention, their view of Durant as the symbol of a foreign power meddling in their affairs. It's a stark reminder that every conflict, every battle is experienced and understood differently by those involved.
It reminds me of what we talked about earlier, that clash of worldviews. The impossibility of finding a single truth in the midst of all that chaos.
Exactly. And even after Durant's release, secured through Oakley's tireless efforts, the book doesn't tie everything up neatly. There's no sense of closure, no easy answers. Those surviving soldiers return home, but they carry the scars, physical and emotional, of what they endured.
The battle might be over, but the war within them continues.
You see it in their struggles to reintegrate into civilian life, to reconcile the horrors they've witnessed with, the normalcy of everyday existence. Lieutenant Lechner faces this grueling recovery from his injuries. Specialist Stebbins awarded a Silver Star for his bravery. He's forever changed by what he experienced.
And then there's Sergeant Nelson. He survives, but carries the guilt of losing his friend, Sergeant Joyce.
It's that haunting what if, the knowledge that he'll never have a chance to repair their strained friendship.
Yeah.
It's a poignant reminder that the true cost of war extends far beyond the battlefield. It's measured in the lives lost, the family shattered, and those invisible wounds that linger long after the guns fall silent.
Black Hawk Down doesn't shy away from any of it. It's a brutal, unflinching look at the reality of war. The chaos, the courage, the profound and lasting impact on everyone and everything it touches.
It's a story that stays with you. It challenges you to think critically about the complexities of conflict, the motivations of those involved, and that enduring human cost of war. It's a book, honestly, everyone should read, even if it's a difficult one, because it reminds us that the true stories of war aren't confined to history books. They live on in the lives of those who fought, those who lost, and those who are forever changed by the experience.
It really does leave us with a lot to think about. The nature of courage, the responsibility of leadership, the enduring human cost of conflict. Black Hawk Down, it doesn't offer easy answers, but it forces us to ask those difficult questions, and that's perhaps the most valuable lesson of all.